right, good morning, everybody. Hope you all recovered well from opening this course on a Sunday afternoon. Fine, well awake, well rested. So we'll get this started with a case discussion this morning on Jakarta. So what a case discussion. It's not a lesson being taught. It's not me talking to you. It's an exchange, basically, on a real-life situation where there are basically no good or bad answers. It's not a black and white kind of situation. It's not a riddle with just a few exact ways to answer it. A case discussion, in fact, is meant to stimulate judgment, try to get to think through a set of issues which will require kind of adjustments, the global solution built on several parts, different kind of actions, policy measures, instruments. And the case discussion is really to confront yourself with what does happen when, as you know, you have to make decisions which are most of the time not that easy to do because there are trade-offs to be made, because there are choices to be exercised. So and you will have several of those case studies discussions this week because, as I said yesterday, that's the way the overall course is built upon. It's built upon those kind of exchanges so that it extracts from you what you already know, basically, and see how you confront this knowledge and experience with the other participants and how this may lead to, well, a set of proposed solutions, a set of proposed decisions, and an understanding on how we can cope with situations which typically are always difficult to deal with. So we'll get this started with Jakarta. And so why Jakarta? Because you could say, well, Jakarta is too big. I mean, Indonesia, 273 million people. The Jakartan metropolitan area, 27 million people, it's huge. But despite it being huge, it embodies basically, I would say, a whole set of problems in terms of urban mobility that you are likely to have run into your own situations, possibly at a different scale, at a different stage. But what you see in Jakarta, I'm sure you have seen it already in the way you have been struggling with those kind of problems. And that's why we believe it's a very interesting case to get this course started, because it provides a range of problems. And if not 100%, it's close possibly to 90% of the kind of problem you are likely to run into when having to solve your urban mobility issues in your own context. So here we are in Jakarta, 27 million people, huge metropolitan area. And, well, at some point, the situation has become so tense, so intractable that, as you've seen in the case, the president had asked his special task force to actually look into it and come up with proposals. And the task force has come up with how many proposals? How many proposals have they made? 21, yes, 21. 17 first, and then 4 after civil society and other proposed additions. So we have a long list of 21 proposals for actions for policy reform. So 21 is pretty large a list. So of course the question is, when you are faced with that many actions possible, well, how do we get started? So we'll try together to bring an answer to that. But before arriving here, we need to take a step back. Take a step back and basically try to redo the steps that this task force had to go through to reach their proposals. So what's happening in Jakarta, which is so much of a problem? What's happening in Jakarta, which is so much of a problem? Congestion, yes, there is congestion. Big, huge congestion. So the first thing we should ask ourselves is, what are the roots of these congestions? What are the main reasons for this congestion to happen? So, having read the case, I mean, there are many different things which are to be found here. So how this congestion is happening? What are the reasons for that?
Concentration of population, excessive concentration
excessive concentration of population, migration. So at this point I start to write things down on the board. So please make sure, let me know if you cannot read it. I'll try to make sure it's readable. So we do have indeed migration. So we in fact have a concentration, we'd say population growth basically in the Jakarta metropolitan area. Then, what did I hear here? Higher income. Income are going up, right. Income are going up. All right, and so what's happening when income are going up? More vehicles. More income, more vehicles. Vehicle increase, income increase. Sorry? No? The number of commuters increase. Yes, there can increase, more vehicles on the street, more commuters, right? So in fact, more commuters mean we do have more trips, more commuting trips. So the mass transport system, so we'll come, yes, so we'll take a look also at the mass transport system and how it works. So mass transport system seems relatively inadequate. Huh? Mass transit, we'll say mass transit, you're lucky if you can read that. So mass transit system doesn't seem to answer the needs properly. We'll get back to that. So we do have migration, population growth, more income, more vehicle, more trips. What characterizes also this evolution? More population, more income, therefore more vehicles. What about how the area is evolving?
Bad city planning. Share of trips made on public transport, they started falling.
That share of trip transport, so yes, we have seen from the comparison of the different studies made that indeed during the last 10 years, the share of public transport has gone down, and dramatically, in particular by buses, something like minus 25%, I guess, if I remember well. So we have a decreasing total share of public transport, which of course has to do with the fact that the mass transit system doesn't seem to answer the needs. So we have this happening on the side of the people moving. What's creating also, what's contributing to the fact that there are more trips? And those trips, how can we characterize?
One major problem was multiplicity of authorities taking the problem. And that created two problems, like incorrect segregation of land use, basically. Land use issue was not handled properly. And too many agencies were involved.
So too many agencies, which is another point, but that's a valid one that we'll note down here on another part of the board. We have what we would call, let's say, too many agencies. Yes, we'll reformulate that later. Too many agencies. That doesn't help cope with the problem. But I'd like us to get back to the root of the problem. Why? How can we qualify this set of issues there? We have migration, population growth, more income, more vehicles, so more trips. What in terms of urban shape, what's happening there? insufficient road space.
People shifted from CBD to the outlying area.
Okay, people shifting from CBD to our outer areas. How can we call that in terms of urban development?
There would be more longer trips.
And there will be longer trips? What kind of urban development is it? How do we?
It is a very unplanned, disintegrated city development.
You said disintegrated, okay, there is another word to qualify that when cities tend to extend beyond original limits. How do we call that? Urban sprawl. They need to say urban sprawl. So we do have sprawl, and that's a major part of the problem there. Now you could think a minute and say, but look, after all, it's cities grow, so they cannot always grow in the center, so they grow at the periphery. Is this inherently wrong?
No.
No, strong is not always inherently wrong. But how?
It is not inherently wrong.
But why? In which cases is it a problem?
It should be proper, adequate communication system, then it's not wrong. Adequate development of the road and expressway to connect that, then it's not wrong.
You say you should have right communication links, but they are, even without getting, it's true, you must have communication links, but even without getting that right away, there are cases where sprawl is not inherently wrong, which would be?
Should be planned expansion.
Should be planned.
The provided for residential space along with working. Both of these provided.
What we say, we have more trips. There is an indication in the case that is telling you that sprawl is actually causing a problem because of the way those trips evolve. There is a clue being given about these trips, these commuter trips.
The number of trips increased.
Number of trips increase, but something about the trips themselves. They become longer, Jacob, right. Those trips, the commuter trips become longer. I believe you are being said that those trips have increased by something like 43% over the last 10 years. The average commuting trips have increased by 43%. And what does it tell you about sprawl if the length of the commuting trips increase?
More congestion.
No, the city is growing outwards. If the trips are growing longer, then the city is showing organic growth and it's growing outwards.
But this organic growth is causing problem with the sprawl.
Workplaces are quite away from the place of living. The distance between workplace and the...
Distance between workplace and place of living, right. Sprawl is a problem when the housing move away from the city faster than the jobs. If the jobs move away from the city at the same pace and housing moves away, you may not end up with a sprawl which actually causes longer commuting trips. But when they do, as here, it is a clear indication that the jobs remain close to the city center, but the housing goes farther away for different reasons. Actually, some poor people have to go farther away because they cannot afford any longer to live in the city center. Some better off people actually decide to move away because they have nicer development made of outside the city and they can use their car to drive in. So you do have a sprawl which is problematic because, indeed, housing is moving away from the city center faster than jobs. So, on the problem side, that's what we do, that's what we have definitely there. Now, on the system itself, we said we have mass transit which seems problematic. Passenger transport has been going down over the last 10 years, yes. And why is this a major problem as far as congestion is concerned?
Lack of integration between various basic mass transport system like rails, then connectivity with the buses and other things, that is also lacking.
There is a lack of integration, that's true. But let's take one step back and see why, yes, why?
Public transportation is going down, so the people is moving to particular private cars or motorcycles.
They are moving to private cars or motorcycle, yes. And you have given in the case some indications of how this translates into occupation of street space. Street space is finite. Street space cannot expand. So you are given some indications, like for instance, you are told that a bus is, you say, between 4 and 6 passenger car equivalents. I mean, that's what you are mentioned there. No, 2 and 4. They say a bus is about 2 and 4 passenger car equivalent. So if somebody, one person in a car is one-on-one, it's 1 passenger car equivalent. Huh? Now we say a bus, it's about 2 to 4 passenger car equivalent, but a bus can carry up to 40 passengers. So it means you have something like 1 to 20 or 110 in terms of occupation of street space compared to a car per passenger. And you're told also that when it comes to motorbikes, depending on how those motorbikes actually flow in the streets, whether they are by groups or whether they are single, it's between 1/5 or 110 passenger car equivalent. So that's the car, that's the buses, and that's the motorbikes. So what we learned from the case is that over the last 10 years, people using buses have been shifting to motorbikes or even shifting to car. Which means in terms of street space, for the same number of people traveling, and actually it's worse because the number had increased, but even with the same number of people traveling, instead of using 1/30, 1/20, 1/10 of passenger car equivalent per person, you use now 1/5 or just 1. So it's a major increase in the use of street space per person traveling. Per person traveling, it's an important concept. Remember yesterday, Dr. Jayak Ho, in his presentations, indicated at the end the shift of policy from cars towards travelers, individuals, persons. And that's what you must keep in mind. In terms of urban mobility, you think of moving people, not moving vehicles. Moving people. And that's the number of people you have to move, which is a question. So indeed, with this evolution, lack of use of public transport, decrease in use of public transport, that it's a massive additional burden on an existing street space. So we do have this decrease in public transport, which is adding pressure on the street space. Now, we were told, I believe, Shahir told us that indeed there was not a good integration between modes. But there's something more that we can say. So we'll mention that. We mention or let's say poor integration. We spoke about public transport. What we didn't speak about precisely the street space. What is being said about the street space in Jakarta, the streets? What's being said about how they are designed? What's being said? You have a very specific comments on the street systems in Jakarta.
6 lanes. 6 lanes. There are 6 lanes.
There are big arteries, 6 lanes, yes.
2 for slow, 3 for fast moving, and 1 for VI.
But goes a little further. You have big lanes, precisely, but is it enough to make it work? Apparently not. What's the problem? What's the problem with the street system? It's a very specific, and it's explicitly said in the case. What's the problem about the street systems in Jakarta? You have large arterials, you have beltways.
But no connecting roads.
No connecting roads, yes, Michael, no connecting roads. Lack of connection, lack of connecting roads. And why is this a real problem, the lack of connecting roads? What does it mean in practice? Get into Jakarta in car, so maybe you should try to draft a small map, how Jakarta looks like. Let's see. You have a map in your case, so that's a shore. You have a kind of CBD around here, and there is one first interior beltway, and then there is a larger exterior beltway. I've never been a drawer myself, and so don't worry too much. This is, and we have some big arterials road, radials, and we have been told that there are developments now in other areas outside the city, housing developments. There have been new center business districts at the intersections of the radials and the internal beltway. Okay, so what now we are saying, lack of connection roads, meaning people go into the city either by the arterial, they use the beltways, and then what happens when they come close to their destination? Why is this lack of connection road is a problem? Do they jump out of the beltway directly in their office space? Anna, tell me. Well, they need to change the modes. In fact, they need to get out of their cars. They need to park their cars. What happens in Jakarta is that you don't have this connecting road, which basically would make it possible to leave the main arterial, to go into a secondary network, to go possibly in a tertiary network, to go where the final destination is. Basically, the main roads, these 4 lanes, 6 lanes, are right in the middle of the center of the city, and there is basically no connection. You branch, everything branches directly on it. So you can picture how it looks like. The traffic cannot disseminate more regularly throughout the secondary network. It just chokes right away into these small arteries branched into the main ones. So lack of connecting roads. So a mass transit system which looked efficient, loss of patronage in public transport, imbalance on roads. Okay, so we see, if we take a look at what we have listed so far, let's see, we can say that all those aspects here, that creates the demand. Demand of mobility, right? And that's the supply of mobility systems. So on the demand side, migration, population growth, incomes, more vehicles, more trips, longer trips, sprawl, that creates the demand. Facing the demand, what you have, a mass transit system, so-so, public transport losing patronage at an ominous rate, poor integration in terms of networks, lack of connecting roads. So, you are the presidential task force, you have made your analysis, that's the demand, that's the reason for the demand to grow, that's the supply of solutions, or would be solutions. And obviously there is an inadequation between the demand and the supply, and that's why we have this Congestion issue. Congestion. I said congestion again. Could we write down in simple terms, simple equation, how this congestion actually can be represented? We can say that congestion equal the vehicle kilometer traveled, that's the intensity of use of the street, the vehicle kilometer traveled, divided by the capacity which is offered to it to travel. VKT, vehicle kilometer traveled, total, divided by capacity. Now we can break down VKT and say that VKT is actually passenger kilometer travel. Remember, we said we are interested in moving people, not moving vehicles. So passenger kilometer travel multiplied by vehicle kilometer travel divided by passenger kilometer travel, so that these terms PKT, PKT, this term will disappear in the simple mathematical equation. You remain with VKT, but showing it this way show that PKT, that's a passenger, VKT divided by PKT, passenger kilometer travel, it is a modal split. It is how many people you have in any given vehicle. If it's a car with one driver, it's 1-to-1, it's 1. If it's a bus, it's 40-to-1. PKT multiplied by VKT by PKT, all this divided by capacity. So that's the three terms basically you have to consider when looking at your congestion problem. PKT, which is your original demand, people who want to move. People who want to move, and they will generate a certain amount of passenger kilometer traveled. The way they are moving, the VKT on PKT is what kind of vehicle are they using? Individual car, motorbikes, buses, and the capacity which is supplied for them to move. So you are the presidential task force. You made your initial diagnosis in terms of how or why are those the reasons for congestion to occur. You know, congestion is the result of this comparison of factors. So now what do we do in order to advance and propose solutions? You are a presidential commission, you are paid handsomely to do this work, so, okay. Let's come up with some proposals. Yeah.
PKT and PKT or deep PKT.
Sorry, you said?
To reduce PKT.
Reduce PKT. So we'll start looking at PKT. What we propose to do, since we have three factors here, and we have PKT, VKT per PKT, and capacity. So we'll consider each of those three factors in turn, right? And so K proposes to look first at PKT, and the passenger PKT, it's a demand basically, so it has to do with here. That's PKT, finally, it's created by those set of factors. So we propose you should reduce demand. Okay, let's take a look. That's what makes demand. So, how can we reduce demand? Fair question.
Move offices towards houses. Move your
Don't-
offices towards the houses.
Moving,
Offices towards houses.
moving the jobs towards the housing. To promote mixed land use, yes. I guess that's a good idea. And the question is term. How long will it take to do that? I mean, you want, as your presidential advisory commission, you want to give first actions can be taken right now, and of course action to be taken which will produce some results in the longer term. So yes, in absolute terms, in the longer term, you want to bring the jobs closer to the housing or bring the housing closer to the jobs. That's a mixed land use pattern, something which And actually there is, in your case, there is an indication that there's been a policy which has been trying to do that, but very successfully. But how do they call it in the case?
But mixed land use should be supplemented by better public transport system. Then only it is.
It must be, but how there is a policy to do that, which has been actually enacted. How do they call it? It's indicated in your case. They call it by a kind of funny name. Look, there is concentrated deconcentration. Yes, that's what they call it. Concentrated deconcentration meant try to deconcentrate both cities and jobs. So create new concentrations of jobs away from the city center, closer to where the housing is moving, which is a good idea. Which is a good idea, but obviously so far it didn't work that well. So far it didn't work that well, which doesn't mean it shouldn't be pursued. But so far it didn't work that well. That has to do with rebalancing the sprawl, basically, and bringing the jobs closer to the and as just
vertical development, there was under expansion.
No, the demand would still increase.
But the mode of transport will be lesser. What we find here, just from the place, is very nearby. Construction is upwards.
so you mean vertically densifying basically rather than spreading. But think, you are a presidential advisory committee. You are advising the president first on public policies. Public policy, things that can be done, things that you have the power to enact.
More public transport system, MRT, BRT.
So we'll get to the capacity. The public transport system is a capacity part, and we are just concentrating on the demand right now, on PKT. And the question was, can we reduce? Indeed, if we reduce PKT, we probably will reduce congestion. We say, as far as the sprawl is concerned, can try to bring the jobs closer to the housing. So there is a kind of longer-term policy, because indeed, in the short run, they have tried to implement this concentrated deconcentration, but not too much avail so far. So if we take the first one, migration. Can we do something about migration? So yes, who said yes? Do you want, what do you want to do about migration?
We can provide better satellite towns so that the people outside people stay outside in the satellite towns, don't come to the main town. So
you want to keep people out of the main town?
You create work areas so that job may be created there, then and the people may stay there. They don't come here.
That seems like a good idea, but in practice, what does happen usually in any country?
Satellite of the main town, so that work areas may go there.
So what does that mean? Again, in the case, there is a suggestion that there have been attempts. There have been attempts to try to do that. By doing what? Michael, yes, by moving government out in other places, by moving government out near Bandung, in other areas away from Jakarta, and also developing other...
Industrial area.
yeah, Adam, you wanted to say something? No? Why that doesn't help?
Because you have got, yes, she's right. The reason being, the employees who are staying there, they will not like to shift to other places because they have got
They are not like to shift. So, yeah, Rajiv.
What we tried in Mumbai, you see, we shifted some major offices to some other center within the city only. So that, we developed a Bandra Kurla complex. Complex was developed, offices were shifted there, so that the movement gets.
But that's a bit rebalancing the sprawl, as we say, within the city area. Try to control the sprawl by actually pushing jobs out as well. But here we are talking on a larger scale, basically, because there is an attraction. Jakarta attracts people from all over the country to flock there. Yes, Chand.
People also come to the cities to avail better education facilities and better medical facilities. If these facilities are created at their doorsteps, they don't have to come to major cities.
So in fact, it means that people come to the city for very good reasons.
More taxation on owning private vehicles.
That has to do with, we'll look those policy a bit later on. But yes, people come from city for very good reasons. So in order to deter them from coming, you would have to offer the same very good reasons to stay where they are. And, and indeed, I mean, there have been attempts in many other countries to do that, to try to control this migration towards a few main poles of development. Sorry, you said?
Counter-magnet towns.
Yes, counter-magnet towns, so create new towns. But you can think of different things. For instance, you can think of in Pakistan, created Islamabad, basically out of nothing. In Brazil, established Brasilia. In Nigeria, Abuja, or in Australia, Canberra, for instance. All those are new towns which have been created basically out of nothing. But if you give it a second thought, I mean, did Islamabad help with the congestion in Karachi? Did Abuja help with the congestion in Lagos? Did Brasilia help with the congestion in Sao Paulo? So in fact, this creation of new cities may maybe help a little, but probably not tackle, provided a long-term solution. They are telling you in the case that indeed the government had been thinking about, yes, moving some government offices out toward Bandung, and even to try to help develop another big city. Which one? They are mentioning another big city that the government help grow so that it becomes another attractive magnet to get people to go elsewhere than Jakarta. Which one? Which is this city which is mentioned in the case? Which is the name of this city? No, Jabodetabek is the name of the metropolitan area around Jakarta, which is the second large city which is mentioned, and where the government was hoping to try to boost so that it become another alternative magnet compared with Jakarta. No, Bandung is where they push some government offices, but it is the same area of the case where they are mentioning this other city. So no ID? There is another big city which is mentioned there towards the south. Surabaya. Good. Was it Surabaya? Good. Great. That's Surabaya, yes. Government has said, well, we'll try to get people rather to go towards Surabaya. And indeed, as we said, with better mixed-use land use planning, that's something you would like to get to. But what, if history is anything to go by, what you can infer from previous attempts of doing this kind of thing is that, well, it may at some point help, but it's unlikely to help in the short term. So migration, there is little you can do right now in the short term because people go to Jakarta for very good reasons, because they believe they'll get more social services, education, health, there will be more jobs. So that's where people go. So population growth itself, could we do anything about population growth? What do you think about population growth? As you, the government, you can do something at population growth?
You can give incentives by like China, one child, one.
Well, let's say in democratic societies, it becomes difficult to control population growth. Right. Can give incentive, but yes, it's difficult to control population growth in democratic societies, let's put it this way. So there is little you can do to prevent the population from growing, really. Income. We say the growth of income creates more demand. So, should we repress the growth of income? No, that's pretty clear. You cannot touch incomes, really. You cannot have an impact on that. People are buying more vehicles. Can we prevent people from buying vehicles? Well, remember what OP mentioned yesterday. it's difficult to prevent people from buying vehicles. Because people like to buy vehicles, because it's a kind of symbol of social achievement, and people like driving cars. So buying vehicles, we will have difficult to do something about it. What we may do is how to convince people not to use them the way they are using them now. But buying them, you cannot really prevent them from doing so. So, and the sprawl, we said, well, there is a way to rebalance the sprawl, and it has started, but it's long, results are long to come by. So, if we look at all those items that we looked through one after one, and that define PKT, meaning the demand, the original demand, people needing to move, well, what's the conclusion about PKT? Can we realistically bring PKT down? No. No, and that's an important aspect to keep in mind when looking at urban mobility issues. You as policymakers, as decision makers, your job is to accommodate demand. It's not to curb it. It's not to suppress it. It's to accommodate it. Because demand exists for a good reason. There is engine of growth behind it. There is a lot of positive pushes which justify demand. So demand in itself must be accommodated. The policy shouldn't be looking at repressing the demand or decreasing it. You have to accommodate PKT. Okay, so PKT we have to accommodate. Now, let's take a look at the capacity first. So capacity, that's the supply. That's what we put here. So we said the mass transit system is not working well. Public transport patronage has gone down. There's poor integration. There is lack of connecting roads. So what can we do about capacity? And in the list of 21 measures proposed, well, there are a number of them about capacity. What are they? What are those measures in the list which are about boosting capacity? Yes, Tata? No.
Increasing BRT, that's creating.
Increasing the BRT network. Yes, got somebody here? Did you?
Management of on-street parking.
Parking. BRT capacity, parking. Any more candidates?
Invest in railroad.
Shared vehicles.
Yeah, BRT capacity, we say parking. You say railroads, investing in railroads, yeah, because there is a commuter rail. What else? The shared vehicle. The shared vehicle has to do with actually trying to impact a bit the VKT, PKT, or put more people in vehicles, so we'll take that up later. But on shared capacity in the supply side, what else is being proposed?
Replace minibuses or bigger buses.
Sorry, minibuses?
Replace small buses.
Replace small buses by larger ones. Yeah, so modernize, let's say. Modernize buses. What else? There is a couple of the big ticket items that you didn't mention yet in terms of supply. Sorry? Sorry. Improved facility for pedestrians. They do that? They say that a bit?
Reduce the number of vehicles.
They will reduce the number of pedestrians, be run over probably too. Yes, it would be a good thing. But there are other big ticket items there. New expressways, new ring roads. That's not a small thing. The proposal for new ring roads, and actually one or two new ring roads. So railroads, as we mentioned, double tracking, yes. But we say ring roads, yes, there are proposals and not one. How many ring roads are being proposed? No, the new ones, just the new ones.
And also road maintenance with new contracts.
The road, yeah, how to maintain better the roads, true, that's right. But there are two competing proposals for the railroads. There are a new internal one and a new external one. And they tell you that the governor is in favor of the internal one and other people are arguing for the external one. Now, what does it mean, internal, external? You have the existing internal here and the external, and they want to do another internal somewhere here, or another external which will go further south, basically. That's the two new ring roads which are being proposed. And there's another major ticket item which is being proposed in terms of capacity, the one that usually everybody jump on it first. What do they want to do in terms of public transport supply? That's on the institutional side, yes. We'll note it somewhere, because that's an important one. It is to address these questions we have laid down here, too many agencies, right? And so there is an proposition to create the Japodétabek Transit Authority, right? But in terms of supply, in terms of public transport supply, I'm sure something that all of you in your cities are dreaming to have one day. I mean, what are they wanted to, what do they want to?
Elevated corridor. Elevated corridor.
Also the metro.
The metro, yes, you all want a metro, right? I mean, every big city wants a metro, come on. Huh? They are proposing what they call the MRT, the Mass Rapid Transit, which has been in the works, or at least in the studies and papers since 1974, they are telling you. They want an MRT. So they propose an MRT, right? Well, let's take a hard look at those proposals. Let's start with the MRT, because usually that's what gets people excited. Huh? So actually, what about the MRT? I mean, you are being told a number of things about the project MRT, because it's not a project which came out yesterday. I mean, it has been there for some time. So what are they telling you in the case about the status of this MRT project?
Planning and design has been completed.
Planning and design has been completed, right? And even that's an important point. So planning and design is completed, and in terms of financing it, there is some money available, guys. I mean, that's something people should focus on right now. There is money available to actually start building the MRT. How much will cost this first tranche of MRT? How much will cost this third tranche of MRT? Louder. How much will cost the MRT? I believe they say $1.5 billion all total, I believe, for the first tranche. For 15 kilometers, $1.5 billion. So that's not pocket money, right? 0.5 billion. And how many passengers? Keep in mind, we are moving people. How many passengers do they expect the MRT to carry? 170,000. And in the second stage, when the full MRT project is completed, 400,000. Okay, so we are looking at 1.5 billion to move 400,000 people. Now, somewhere in the case, there is a very critical number that we didn't mention yet, which is the total number of trips taken daily in Jakarta. What's this number? How many trips are being taken daily in Jakarta? I heard something there. 37 million trips. No, 37 million trips. 37 million trips. I mean, just figure this out. 37 million trips a day in Jakarta. That's what the demand is, 37 million trips per day. And that's what you are trying to accommodate here. $37 million trips per day. So 37 million trips per day, and you have a proposal to spend $1.5 billion to move how many people? 400,000. What do you think?
Very less.
Not cost effective.
Doesn't look like that great. And where is this MRT plan to run? If we take a look at our kind of makeshift map here, the BRT is planned to run, of course, alongside one of the main arterial, north-south arterial, something around here. That's where the MRT is, the tranche is supposed to be implemented. So obviously it's one of the heaviest trafficked arteries. But what can we think about the impact this will have on the whole pattern? We already know 400,000 compared to 1.5 million is kind of the drop in the bucket in terms of addressing the demand. But on top of that, there are already, what is already running along those north-south arterials? Transjakarta, yes, the BRT. The BRT is already running along those arterials, so what we can see is actually some transfer from BRT to metro. Is that likely to help the congestion? Not that much. So MRT, I would say, as such, is that really the silver bullet? At least at this point, we are not quite sure. BRT, precisely, there is already a BRT. How many people does the BRT carry?
300,000 passengers.
300,000 passengers, right. So the BRT carries 300,000 passengers, and there are plans to expand it. But again, I mean, that's same comparison apply. What can we say? The BRT, as you say, has been somewhat of a success, but what does it say about precisely the BRT success? How do they qualify it?
Outstanding.
They say it's outstanding in the first stage because if we compare between the before and after BRT, it's better after the BRT. But when you compare the BRT in Jakarta to the model it was supposed to mirror, which town gave the ID? Which town? Bogota, yes. And Bogota carry 1.7 million, with basically even a little less longer network. So it's a success, but it's a relative success. So here you are. I mean, you are the Presidential Advisory Committee guys, so you are thinking hard. Okay, we have a metro, $1.5 billion, we'll bring, maybe we'll move 400,000 people. We have a BRT which is moving 300,000, and we can possibly expand somehow. What do we have? Railroads. What is proposed to be done about the railroads? We mentioned doubling the tracks. We mentioned adjusting the fares. What's the problem with the project of the railroads? Do you believe improving the railroads will indeed seriously help with the situation? And you do have some indication there which should lead you to a conclusion as to what to think of the proposals to expand the railroad. Yes. Sorry.
MRT will substantially reduce the VKT upon PKT.
Well, the MRT will help a bit, as we said, but in absolute terms, you cannot count on the MRT itself to resolve the problem. We said, we'll get back to it after that. That's what I left a question mark next to MRT, because if you consider it in isolation, it doesn't look like much. But precisely, we don't want, in the end, to look at all those things in isolation. The railroads, I said, take a look. There are proposals, among the 21 proposals, to actually double the tracks of the railroads, to expand, to do a lot of things, pour a lot of money again. What's the problem with the railroads?
Commuter railroad has got about 6 times more capacity. There is scope to increase 6 times more carrying capacity. Jakarta has got about 6 times more capacity.
The railroads could increase significantly its capacity, but what's the main problem with the railroad? Iris, you didn't tell us much things. What do you think about the railroad?
The potential is very
So please, just, Iris, what do you think?
The potential is very limited because it doesn't go near the usually.
Good! The railroad doesn't go where people go. I mean, that's very basic stuff, right? The railroads go to the original CBD. The railroads goes here, but people don't want to travel here anymore. They want to go there, and possibly in other areas or outside. And the railroads go here. So I don't know what they were smoking when they established the forecast for the railroad patronage, but obviously, why people will want to take a railroad which doesn't bring them to where they want to go? So, I mean, that's very basic stuff, right? But again, don't think about vehicles. Think about people. People don't want to go where the railroad would like to carry them to. So railroads are extremely doubtful that you get something serious out of the railroad. Now, ring roads. And the governor, you've seen, the governor is very fond of creating another internal ring road, 72 kilometers, I believe, right, something like that. So, what do you think about the railroads? You like railroads, ring roads? I mean, some cities, they do like ring roads. I mean, in Beijing, you have 7 of them already. What will the ring road bring, additional ring road bring to the present situation? More cars. Yes, Manuela, more cars. You create additional street space, you create more demand to use it. Additional ring road, whether internal or external, will probably bring more car. More car where? Towards the city center, which is heavily congested. And once they get there, what will happen? Knowing what we know about the street system in Jakarta. Once you create a new ring road and bring more cars there, what can you expect? Further congestion, of course. You'll bring more cars, but you are still missing what we said was missing. Connecting roads. So it's strange. I mean, you as a presidential advisory committee, you make the right diagnosis that Jakarta is missing connecting roads. And still, you don't propose connecting roads. You propose another ring road. Why so? Why so? What do you think? Why do you think this commission is proposing another ring road or 2 more ring roads instead of saying, look, we should think hard and long and see how we could actually improve this connecting road system? Why, in your view, has the proposal come out for new ring roads? Since you clearly see that new ring roads are likely to solve the problem. It will bring more cars into Jakarta without providing any real means to handle them properly and to reduce the congestion. and how these new ring roads are being planned, actually, physically. How do they want to implement those, especially the internal new ring road? Physically, how will it look like? Elevated stuff, yes, elevated ring roads. Because, of course, it's already crowded down there. Which is why, by the way, it is difficult to make connecting roads. It's a very practical term here. You are faced with a very congested downtown, and it's a kind of narrow networking of streets. You have the big arterials, you have already the two ring roads, but in between it's very narrow, it's cramped there. And that's why the only way to build another ring road is to put it on an elevated structure, because there's just no room to put it at street level. And so, of course, instead of that, to think how you could improve the connections, well, that will be tough. That means that you'll have probably to resettle some people, to erase some housing quarters, to make room for basically having those ramps in and out of the existing ring road, to make a better linkage with the arterial streets. That's actually what the city needs first, before bringing new cars with a new ring road. But that's difficult to do. It's difficult to do, and from a political perspective, even more so. And why so? Why just? Because, I mean, you know, in your own city, you say, okay, we'll have to raise a few houses here and there, and we relocate people so that we can facilitate the connection. That could be a hard sell. And if instead we say, look, I mean, we'll build another 72 kilometers elevated ring road. And what the governor or the mayor can do when the ring road is completed. What does a mayor do when a big piece of work is completed? It inaugurates it, yes. A ring road can be inaugurated. A set of connecting roads done painfully, unlikely so. A ring road, you inaugurate it. I mean, you know that. I mean, people like, elected officials like to inaugurate stuff. Look what I brought to the city. So they propose 2 new ring roads. And as we said, as Manuela told us, those new railroads will just bring more cars into the city. And I'm not quite sure we did anything serious to actually address congestion. Well, so PKT, we said we couldn't do much about it. Capacity, we sprinkled a few question marks. Don't believe we got any serious answer. VKT on PKT, which has to do with the modal split. The modal split here. What can be done there to influence the modal split? You touched upon here and there a couple of things, but now let's try to focus on what can be done to change the modal split. Alors, you mentioned increased transport, number of buses. Number of buses. That's we didn't mention explicitly the number of buses. So let's pay attention a minute to the number of buses. On the BRT, how many buses are? Trans-Jakarta, how many buses? How many buses from Jakarta? No, that 24,000, it's all the other. All the regular buses are 24,000. Trans-Jakarta, the BRT, how many? 600. You have 600 Trans-Jakarta buses, which it shows, gives you an idea of the scale also compared to the demand. 600, but you have 24,000 regular buses of all kinds. And we already heard that there is a plan to try to eliminate the smaller buses, get to larger ones, which Probably it's one step in the right direction. Have less vehicles on the road, less road space for the same number of people being moved. 24,000 buses. So getting back to this model split, how could we, as public policy, what can we do to try to induce a different model split? Because you realize that if we want somehow to take advantage of a combination of additional supply, the MRT, it's in the pipes, it's probably will get done. Since the money is there, it's very difficult for a politician who has the money to invest in a big thing that can be inaugurated to resist doing it. So the money is there, it probably be done. Ring roads, it's more questionable, but some work will be probably done on street space as well. So the question is how to help combine those various additional supply elements into something which will actually help. Integration things, physical and fair integration. Yes, something that, of course, you mentioned it already, but at the time to insist on it, there is a lack of integration, both physical and, of course, fair and institutional. There is no institutional integration, there is no physical integration that we mentioned here, there is no fair integration. And indeed, in order to make it appealing for a passenger to actually use a public mode, you would like to offer him a solution from where he lives, where he will actually get out home in the morning to where he wants to go, which will be an integrated one, so that he will not have, as he has today, to pay several fares where they move to a bus to another bus, and have some confidence that there will be a physically integrated system. He will not spend half an hour waiting here and there for a bus to come. So yes, you want a more physical integration of the system. You want a fair integration, but for that to happen, as we said before, right now there are so many agencies which are monitoring the system. So many that there is nobody in charge of a comprehensive public transport policy for the whole area, which is called the Jabodetabek area, the metropolitan area of Jakarta. And that's why one of the proposals of the group, and probably the one you should start with, is the establishment of the Jabodetabek Transit Authority. Precisely to address this lack of integration. Make it possible to assemble the various parts of the supply, and what is the main part of the supply today, and what still be the main part of the supply tomorrow. Buses. Buses. And again, that's something which probably is true about everywhere.
Licensed buses.
Well, organized and licensed buses. So, of course, in Jakarta, you have I would say, a medley of buses of various kinds, official ones, comfortable ones, small ones, unofficial ones, competing for traffic in the worst possible conditions. What are you being told also about the safety? You have an indication in the case about
many accidents.
Many accidents. What kind of figure is being given? About 18,000 Indonesians killed every year. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot. And a good deal of that in the cities. Because buses, physically they are competing for clients. So there are some people waiting for buses at some stops, and some of those minibuses will run against each other to get there first and get the clients. So it's extremely dangerous. And so, yes, getting back to what I was saying, in basically all cities in the world, the basic fabric of public transport system will be made of buses. Now, of course, it is not meant to mean that mass rapid transit or commuter railroads are of no use. But you just cannot cover those large metropolitan areas, and cities around the world are still growing and will still grow more than half the world population is already in cities, and what we expect is that in the coming decades, 90% of population growth will take place in cities, and cities will continue to grow. So we'll end up with thousands of megacities. Now, it's not possible, it will probably never be possible to cover those megacities with mass rapid transit systems. It will be far too expensive. Not possible to cover them either with extended BRTs. So the basic mean of public transport will remain buses. And the question is, how do we make something coherent, something more effective than the sum of its parts with those various pieces of the public transport system so that it produces a better solution?
Improve the quality of the bus services.
So, yes, indeed, the modernized buses, that's something that we will want to focus on. So if we get back to what you already said is important, we certainly want to promote the creation of a Jabodetabek Transit Authority to overcome the institutional fragmentation, which is a major obstacle to any kind of integration. And I believe you are, of course, convinced by that when we have, 5, 6, 7 different authorities at different levels, each competent in its specific jurisdiction, is quasi impossible to have a real coordination. So you need that first, because this authority will make it possible to take steps to modernize the buses across the region. Will make it possible later on to have an integrated fare system compensation, making sure that whoever is being paid is being actually, by the travelers, is being distributed to each separate operator later on. So you need the Transit Authority, the Jabodetabek Transit Authority, and that's something which should probably be done as a matter of priority here. Then, indeed, modernizing the buses, the bus system, helping transform the supply. But remember, those are private sector operating. So you as a government, you can induce, you can provide incentives for the bus to replace the old by the new. You can decide and offer a program to scrap and to try to formalize a bit. I'm not always convinced that you can formalize all informal transport. That's another possible discussion. But you want to improve, to bring into the formal sector as much as possible, with an institutional framework which makes it clear what will be the demand on the bus operators, what kind of service you expect them to provide, you as a public authority, and what fares you would like to see charged throughout the system. You mentioned one interesting thing earlier, which is parking. I'm sure you are familiar with the sights of cars parked about everywhere, and I guess throughout the week you will see pictures of this. Now, parking is probably the first and easiest policy measures that city management can take. Start regulating parking.
Meterized parking.
Start making people pay for parking and enforce it so that walkways are for people who walk, not for cars. Decide a city parking policy. Doesn't cost much, doesn't cost almost anything, basically, apart maybe to put in place some payment systems.
A lot of land would be required for construction of multi-story parking.
So interesting point. Taj is saying, so land will be required when you build a building. So the idea is, if somebody asks for a permit to build a building, what do you want to do? To impose a certain number of parking spaces?
That is there in the planning of the city. The commercial area and the business area and the office area should have a certain number of parking.
So that's one way of looking at it.
100 square meter, maybe say 3 parking.
That's one way of looking at it. But let's just think about it a second. We say, okay, we build new buildings in the inner city area, and we provide those buildings with parkings. But, so if you provide the city with parking, the more buildings we build with parkings, what can you expect in terms of more cars getting there, right? So they know where to park, but chances are it will add to the congestion out there.
So there should be a balance between the two.
In fact, there are two different views. If you, in the US, there is a very interesting comparison case between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Los Angeles has exactly this policy. If you propose to build, if you ask for a permit to build a building in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is extremely spread around. There is many different, there is not one CBD, it's all spread around. But if you ask for a permit to build a building, you'll be required by that, indeed, that made square meters, they call it square feet in that, but how many square feet you need to have a parking spot. San Francisco, it's totally the opposite. Within the inner city, if you build, it's prohibited to provide any parking space. Prohibited.
But the problem is the demand side cannot be reduced. So the people will anyway buy.
But in San Francisco, there is a very intensive public transport system. And they have those park and ride parkings all around the city for people to drive there or bike there, actually, and leave your bike on your car during the day at the park and ride system, which typically parking space which is much less expensive but is out on the outskirts of the city, and then people can actually ride in using different metro, BRT, light rails, cable cars, whatever.
It means that there should be adequate public transport system in that condition.
It means, of course, that if you want to restrict the use of the car, the use, I say not the ownership, right, but restrict the use of the car, you must first provide an alternative supply of public transport. And that's why the World Bank is involved in financing public transport systems, but that's also why when we are involved in financing public transport systems, we are in parallel helping set up an institutional framework which will make it likely that this public transport system will offer a viable solution integrated with the existing bus networks, so rationalizing the bus, helping put in place a parking policy, and help make sure the additional projects in terms of road capacity are done in a sensible way. OP sitting down there, no, he's not sitting anymore, but he's not very far away. OP has one thing he likes to say, and I'll say here on his behalf, that you cannot escape congestion by construction. Of course, you want to qualify a bit. Sometimes you need to construct new roads, yes. But don't believe that just bringing new capacity blindly will help solve the problem. Roads will appeal new cars. It will just bring new cars into a place which is already typically congested. And if indeed we bring additional parkings with no thought given on how those additional parkings will impact the traffic on the street space, well, chances are it will be contributing to the traffic, to the congestion again. So you want a parking policy, you want first to establish this joint transit, Metropolitan Transit Authority, have a parking policy, modernize the bus fleet, and don't fool yourself, modernize the bus fleet is a very hard nut to crack. That's probably why typically the mayors, the politicians will prefer to say we'll build the ring road, will be extremely happy to say we'll build an MRT, we'll inaugurate an MRT, possibly before the next election if possible. That's definitely why they would like to do that. Now, is this inherently wrong? No, of course. But with the BRT giving 400,000 people and a BRT moving 600, maybe you can expand to 1 million. Comparing that to your 37 million trips per day, you realize that as of today, and as will be tomorrow, even with those additional supplies, the vast majority of the 37 million people will still have to use the buses. And therefore, for those projects to go ahead in a way which will bring a solution to the congestion in Jakarta, when you build the MRT and when you expand the BRT, at the same time and ideally basically simultaneously with it, you want, when the MRT is being built, that you have reorganized the bus system so that the bus systems can help feed the BRT. That's what the physical integration principle means. You want to have bus which, instead of being totally haphazardly distributed, you have to have a line of buses which will converge toward the BRT or MRT lines. You'll have to have some park and ride facility when people can leave their car and take buses that will help them reach an MRT or a BRT station, so that you have a combination with an integrated fare policy so that you pay the fare once and once only. And that will start helping with the problem. And you combine that with a longer-term solution, indeed trying to implement those policies which will help balance the land use so that jobs, little by little, will go. You heard in the case, some jobs are already going south, and the government may indeed implement, some government agency, move them out from the city center. But this has to be done in conjunction with improving the public transport system. If not, it will just get the vehicle moving in different directions, but it will not help with the street space problem. So among your 21 measures, you definitely want to have a metropolitan transit authority. You probably want to start implementing a strong parking policy and indeed focus on modernizing the bus fleets. And you can be confident that the MRT will be done anyway, but once the MRT is operational, you want the bus network to have been reorganized so that it feeds the MRT, so that it feeds the BRT line when the BRT line is expanded, so that you have a continuum of the system. And keep in mind that even when that is done, which hopefully will bring some relief, the vast majority of people using all the systems, the major part of their time, they will spend on the buses. And it's difficult to organize the buses because there are a lot of vested interests. You are told in the case there are not bus owners who are actually playing with their buses. We are not quite sure sometimes if they fully declare the revenues. A lot of cash is moving in these buses, and that's always attractive to be able to play with cash. Some big corporations have some transport companies. Sometimes you just wonder why. Maybe just because it gives them access to a lot of easy cash every day. So when you speak of rationalizing this, you'll confront those kind of local interests. So you need to have a strong political will to say, look guys, we are investing public money by billions into big ticket items like the MRT. We probably will also improve the road system, but at the same time, we absolutely need for this money to be wisely invested. We absolutely need to improve the bus network because that's what will help people first. So some firm stands have to be taken. So look, if some of those bus operators are not happy, well, decisions will have to be made to implement a real strong regulation to facilitate this transformation of the bus system. And again, it's a hard thing to do, but that's what you are in your position if you advise elected officials. That's what you should tell them. Look, okay, it's fine to invest in large transport systems, but only if we take care of the basic system, which still, in basically all the cases will be bus-based. And you must make sure this bus-based system will feed into the mass transit when mass transit will exist. And if you don't have any mass transit, it's just a question of rationalizing the buses so that they provide a better service, they connect with each other. It is an integrated fare policy so that it's easy for the people to use. And even if it's difficult, well, elected officials have to confront those difficulties and say, look, that's what we need to do because that's what will provide the results we are looking for. So, at the end of the day here, looking at that, I guess you out of the 21 proposal, you should say, look, establishing the joint, the Metropolitan Transport Authority is a must, starting seriously considering a parking policy, focusing right now on the bus system. And in parallel, well, okay, the MRT will probably proceed because the money is there, because it's too attractive, and because if you improve the bus system to fit the MRT, chances are it will indeed help a bit, but you cannot just claim the MRT will solve the problem by far, no.
We can also have taxation system for those people, high tax for those people who want to bring their car to the CBD.
You can have other solutions were proposed, have a congestion charging system, having discouraging people, all the same objective, discouraging people from using their car. But remember, you can do that, and you should do that at some point, but only when there is a credible alternative supply, so that you don't leave people stranded and not able to move. So you need to build the alternative supply, or to reassemble it in a way which makes sense, which makes it possible to use, and then you can enforce those policies. And it will be all the more successful than the supply has been geared up in a way which is attractive enough for people, let's say upper middle class people who like to drive their car. Well, you need to offer a relatively comfortable system in terms of buses so that they'll be willing to take them. And of course, you can reinforce that by some fiscal incentive, make it costly to use the car.
Simultaneously, actually, in some of the society, there is a problem of kind of status consciousness.
But the status, that's why it's difficult and probably utopic to believe you can prevent people from buying cars. But the status, you tell them, look, okay, you buy your car, you park it in front of your house for everybody to see, but during the week you commute with the public transport, and during the weekend you drive around with your car. Fine. That's the one main objective, I believe, on transport policy, actually, generally, will be to disconnect, basically, car use from car ownership.
So
that's
why can't we take certain policy measures or legislative measures by which we can make it mandatory for municipal authorities that they should approve and pass only those building plans, whether they are commercial, residential or official, which have the provision of parking at the ground floor.
But as we say, I mean, if you mandate parking constructions, you create an appeal to use the cars. What you want to do is probably inside downtowns to discourage people from using their cars. Therefore, you don't want to offer them free parking on easy parking. You want to offer them an alternative way of traveling, so that indeed they are incentivized to use that and make it or if you build parking, make them very costly. I mean, in the World Bank, even for World Bank staff downtown Washington, if you want to use the parking in the World Bank building, it costs us $100 a month. And at the same time, the bank is sponsoring the public transport system. You get basically a subsidy every month for using the public transport instead of bringing with your car. So that's a combination of actions you want to consider. We need to bring the session to a close at this point. So I hope you got some interesting, Farhad. Yes?
This 21 policy measures, has it been thought through by those people who has proposed it? Is there any priority on this? Or
as far as we know, and actually Thierry Desclos, our colleague, was actually in Jakarta a couple of weeks ago, they are still there, the 21st proposals, the 21 proposals. They are still there, but little has been acted upon so far. Not even prioritized. But okay, that's what I tried to do today, and I hope you enjoyed a bit the discussion. All right, I guess you all deserve the coffee break. So, thanks.